Throw this filthy kidnapper out. Let her rot in the streets. The ruthless billionaire ripped my crying, blind daughter from my arms. He thought he was exacting justice. He thought I was the monster who stole his child and took her sight. He didn't know I had walked 10 miles through a freezing blizzard, shedding my own blood to keep that stranger's baby alive. He froze my bank accounts. He left me to die in the rain. But when the medical reports finally hit his desk, the arrogant emperor of New York realized he had just destroyed the only angel who had ever truly loved his child. The freezing New York rain soaked through Aria's threadbare coat. But she didn't care. She only tightened her grip on the tiny, fragile hand holding hers. "Are we there yet, Mommy?" Lily asked. Her unseeing eyes, clouded with a milky haze, stared blankly into the storm. Aria knelt on the wet pavement, kissing the child's cold forehead. "We're here, my sweet angel. The doctors at the charity clinic will examine you today. Soon, you'll see the colors of the sky." As Aria adjusted Lily's sleeve, a heavy platinum bracelet slipped down the child's wrist. It was engraved with a snarling wolf crest. It was the only piece of Lily's unknown past, worn the night Aria pulled her from a freezing alley 5 years ago. Inside, the charity clinic was a chaotic sea of desperate people. Aria worked 3 grueling jobs just to survive. But this surgery required a miracle, the prestigious Vanguard Vision Fund. Aria. A slick, oily voice cut through the noise. Dr. Marcus, the clinic director, stepped uncomfortably close. He smelled of cheap cologne, his eyes tracing her with a repulsive hunger. "Dr. Marcus," Aria said, keeping her tone sharp, "we are here for Lily's final screening." Marcus backed her against the peeling wall. "Thousands of blind children are on that list, Aria. My pen decides who gets the surgery and who stays in the dark forever." He reached out, his thick finger brushing her jaw. It would be a tragedy if Lily's application fell into the shredder. But join me for a private dinner tonight, and she gets the top spot. Aria violently slapped his hand away. Her eyes blazed with fierce, motherly fury. "Don't ever touch me. There are reporters right in the lobby. If you threaten my daughter, I will scream your disgusting conditions to every microphone in this building." Marcus sneered, taking a menacing step back. "Let's see how long your pride lasts when your kid is blind for the rest of her pathetic life." As Marcus stormed off, a local news crew flooded the lobby, broadcasting live. Harsh, blinding camera lights swept the room. Terrified by the sudden noise, Lily whimpered, burying her face into Aria's worn coat. Her tiny hands clutched desperately at Aria's collar. Unnoticed by the frantic crowd, the heavy camera lens zoomed directly onto the crying child's trembling hands. Glinting fiercely under the television lights was the platinum wolf crest. The secret buried for 5 years was suddenly broadcast directly onto screens across the city. Miles away, inside the impenetrable glass and steel of the Blackwood Citadel, the air was suffocating. 10 powerful executives held their breath as Alexander Blackwood reviewed a billion-dollar contract. Alexander was a tyrant. His heart had turned to absolute ice 5 years ago when his infant daughter was kidnapped. He had burned through cartels and spent millions hunting for her, finding nothing. It left him a ruthless shell of a man. Behind him, the wall-mounted television played the local news on mute. Alexander raised his gold pen to sign. But as his lethal eyes caught the screen, the pen stopped. He didn't breathe. He stared at the platinum wolf crest on the wrist of the blind, crying little girl. The exact bracelet he had custom-ordered the day his daughter was born. Alexander? Valeria, his elegant adopted sister, stepped forward. A fake look of concern masked the sudden, explosive panic in her chest. She had paid mercenaries to throw that baby into a freezing ravine. How was she alive? Crack. The solid gold pen snapped in half inside Alexander's fist. Ink and blood dripped onto the contract. He stood up so violently, his heavy chair crashed against the glass wall. Valeria rushed to him, spinning lethal lies. "Alex, look at that woman holding her. She's dressed in rags. The child is blind. That vile woman must have kidnapped your daughter and blinded her purposefully to beg for money." Alexander heard nothing but the roaring of a beast waking from a 5-year hibernation. The veins in his neck popped. "Get the helicopters," he commanded, his voice shaking the foundation of the room. "Tear that hospital apart." The deafening sound of military helicopter blades shattered the clinic's windows. The building shook. People screamed as 3 black armored SUVs violently breached the courtyard. Dozens of elite shadow guards flooded the corridors, pinning anyone who moved against the walls. Then he walked in. Alexander Blackwood stalked through the terrified crowd like the Grim Reaper, his lethal gaze locked onto the blind little girl and the woman holding her. Before Aria could speak, Alexander ripped the child from her arms with brutal, unstoppable force. "Mommy!" Lily screamed, flailing blindly. "Mommy, Aria, help me!" "Lily!" Aria shrieked, lunging forward to claw at Alexander's heavy coat. "Let go of my daughter." 2 massive guards slammed Aria hard onto the cold tile floor, knocking the wind out of her. Alexander shielded his crying daughter against his chest. He looked down at Aria with pure, unadulterated hatred. "Your daughter?" he whispered, chilling her to the bone. "You stole her. You took her sight. And you dare call yourself her mother?" Aria gasped under the guard's heavy boots. "No, I found her. She was dying in the snow. She needs me." "Throw this filthy kidnapper out," Valeria sneered, stepping from behind Alexander. Alexander turned his back. "Freeze every bank account associated with her name. Ensure she is blacklisted from every job and shelter in this state. If I see her face near my daughter again, kill her." The guards dragged Aria across the lobby, throwing her out the shattered doors. She crashed onto the unforgiving pavement. The torrential rain instantly soaked her to the bone as she desperately crawled toward the departing armored vehicles. "Lily, my baby," she choked. The massive engines roared, vanishing into the dark city. The ruthless billionaire thought he had exacted justice. He didn't know he had just destroyed the only angel who had ever truly loved his child. Inside the opulent Blackwood estate, marble floors and Renaissance paintings offered only a suffocating silence. There was no joy here, only the agonizing, heart-wrenching screams of a child. "Get away from me!" Lily shrieked. She huddled in the corner of the massive king-sized bed. A silver tray of gourmet food, truffle, mashed potatoes, and Wagyu beef had been violently pushed to the floor. Valeria stood nearby, holding warm milk with a calculated smile. "Sweetheart, please eat. I am your Aunt Valeria. I just want to love you." "No!" Lily sobbed, blindly swatting the air. "You smell like cold things. I want Mommy Aria. Take me back to Mommy Aria." Alexander stood in the doorway, his broad shoulders stiff. He had destroyed empires, but looking at his own weeping flesh and blood, he was completely powerless. "Lily," Alexander whispered pleadingly, "you are safe now. That woman kept you from me. She hurt you." Lily shook her head violently, pulling her own hair. "She didn't. Mommy gave me her jacket when it was freezing. She only drinks tap water so I can have milk. Let me go to her." The child's desperate loyalty struck Alexander like a physical blow. He stepped back, the air knocked from his lungs. Silas, his imposing head of security, appeared in the hallway and gave a silent nod. The medical results were ready. Inside his dark private study, Dr. Aries, a world-renowned toxicologist, adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Blackwood, the blindness is not congenital. Her optic nerves were chemically scorched by a synthetic neurotoxin. The doctor took a deep breath. It's an untraceable poison reserved for elite espionage. Someone administered a lethal dose to an infant. Her tiny body fought it off, but the blindness was collateral damage. The bourbon glass shattered in Alexander's grip. Crystal sliced his palm, dropping blood onto the carpet. A slum-dwelling woman couldn't afford military-grade neurotoxin. The poison came from inside his house. There's more, Dr. Heiress continued. Despite living in absolute poverty, her health metrics are impossible. Flawless immune system, perfect bone density. Whoever this Aria woman is. She didn't use your daughter as a prop. She worshipped her. She gave that child a level of care money cannot buy. Alexander staggered backward against his desk. The truth clawed at his throat. He looked at Silas, who held a black leather folder. "Read it," Alexander rasped. Silas swallowed hard. Aria Vance. 5 years ago, she lived in an abandoned cabin in the Whisperwood Mountains, 200 miles away. Silas dropped a satellite photo of a desolate, snow-covered forest onto the desk. The mercenaries didn't dump your daughter in the city. They drove her off the grid during the worst blizzard of the decade. They threw a feverish infant into a frozen ravine, expecting the snow to bury the evidence. Alexander stopped breathing. The mental image of his tiny daughter freezing in the dark made the room spin. Aria heard crying while walking home from a night shift. Silas said, his voice thick. She dug through the ice with bare hands. Medical records show she was admitted that night with severe frostbite. She walked 10 miles in a whiteout blizzard, carrying a stranger's baby inside her own coat. Silas placed a stack of crumpled receipts on the desk. Her financial records. Blood donation clinics, twice a month. Pay stubs from 3 minimum wage jobs. She lived on instant ramen, so every penny could buy premium formula and specialist appointments for Lily. Alexander collapsed into his leather chair. The silence was deafening. He had hunted monsters for 5 years, but the real monster was him. Hours ago, he had looked into the eyes of the woman who bled and froze for his child. And he had thrown her out into the cold rain. He had ordered her blacklisted from survival. He had destroyed her. A raw, guttural groan ripped from Alexander's throat. He stood up aggressively, grabbing his coat. "Bring the car around. I'm going to find her." "Sir, wait." Silas blocked his path. "You can't just show up. She is terrified of you. Furthermore, whoever poisoned Lily is still breathing. If they realize you care about Aria, they will target her to silence the past." Alexander froze. His paranoid mind saw the logic. He couldn't just apologize. He had to build a fortress around her first. His expression hardened into cold, lethal steel. "Deploy the elite shadow unit," Alexander commanded. 6 men watching her, 24 hours a day, unseen. If a single drop of dirty rain touches her skin, you answer to me with your lives. He picked up his personal tablet. "Link the security feed directly to this screen. I want to see the woman who saved my world." For 48 hours, the ruthless tyrant of New York did not sleep. Alexander Blackwood sat in the suffocating darkness of his study, his eyes locked onto the glowing screen of his tablet. It was a direct, encrypted feed from the elite shadow unit. He watched every agonizing second of the hell he had personally created for the woman who saved his child. The screen showed Aria standing outside a cheap, run-down motel. A harsh, unforgiving wind whipped her wet hair across her pale face. The motel manager stood in the doorway, sneering as he threw her small, worn-out duffel bag directly into a muddy puddle. "I told you, your cards are completely declined," the manager shouted, waving a voided receipt. "Every single bank in the city flagged your name. I don't run a charity for beggars. Get off my property before I call the cops." Aria didn't argue. She simply dropped to her knees in the cold mud, frantically wiping the dirty water off a small, crumpled photograph she had taped to the side of her bag. It was a picture of Lily smiling brightly, eating a cheap vanilla ice cream cone. Aria pressed the damp photo against her chest, her shoulders shaking violently as silent, heartbroken sobs racked her fragile body. In his study, Alexander gripped the edge of his mahogany desk so hard his knuckles turned bone white. The wood cracked under his fingers. He wanted to send his fleet of helicopters right now. He wanted to burn that motel to the ground and wrap her in silk. But Silas had warned him. Valeria's spies were everywhere. Whoever poisoned Lily 5 years ago was closely watching Alexander's every move. If he suddenly showed up to rescue a homeless woman in broad daylight, the assassins would realize Aria's true value. He had to wait. He had to protect her from the shadows until the trap was perfectly set. Night fell over the city like a heavy, suffocating blanket. The freezing rain returned, washing the desolate streets of Brooklyn. The surveillance feed showed Aria walking aimlessly down a narrow, flickering alleyway. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. She leaned heavily against a brick wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the wet concrete, burying her face in her hands. She had nothing left to fight for. Suddenly, the blinding headlights of a luxury silver Mercedes pierced the darkness of the alley. The car tires hissed against the wet pavement, stopping mere inches from Aria's feet. The driver's door swung open. Dr. Marcus stepped out, holding a large, expensive umbrella. He adjusted his silk tie, looking down at Aria's shivering, helpless figure with a vile, triumphant sneer. "Well, well, well." Marcus chuckled, his voice echoing in the narrow alley. "Look at the proud, fierce mother now, sitting in the gutter like the trash you truly are." Aria slowly raised her head. Her face was deathly pale, but her eyes immediately hardened with disgust. She tried to stand up, using the brick wall for support, but her legs were trembling from sheer exhaustion. "Get away from me, Marcus," Aria warned, her voice raspy but defiant. Marcus closed his umbrella, tossing it into the passenger seat. He stepped forward, trapping her against the rough bricks. "You still don't get it, do you? You think it was just bad luck that your credit card stopped working? You think it's a coincidence that every hospital in the state suddenly rejected your job applications last year?" Aria froze, her breath hitching. "What did you do?" Marcus laughed, a dark, predatory sound. He leaned in, his foul breath hitting her face. "I am the director of the medical board, Aria. I have friends in banking. I blocked your loans, I blacklisted your resumes. I squeezed you from every side, waiting for the day you would finally break and crawl into my bed to save that blind brat." Disgust and sheer horror washed over Aria. For years, she had blamed herself for not working hard enough. But it was him. This monster had been orchestrating her misery from the very beginning. "You are sick," Aria spat, pushing hard against his chest. "I would rather die in this alley than let you touch me." Marcus's eyes flared with violent anger. He grabbed both of her wrists, slamming her roughly against the wall. Aria cried out in pain as the bricks scraped her skin. "You don't have a choice anymore, you pathetic beggar." Marcus roared, pinning her down. "You have nothing. No one is coming to save you." Crack. Inside the penthouse study, the military-grade tablet shattered into a dozen jagged pieces. Alexander didn't just break the screen. He crushed the metal frame entirely within his bare hands. He didn't press the intercom. He didn't call Silas to send the guards. The time for waiting in the shadows was over. Alexander kicked his office door open, his black trench coat billowing behind him like the wings of a fallen angel. He bypassed his driver, threw open the door of his heavily armored, matte black Rolls-Royce Phantom, and slammed his foot onto the gas pedal. The V12 engine roared like a waking leviathan, tearing out of the underground garage. Back in the alley, Marcus roughly grabbed the collar of Aria's threadbare coat, preparing to rip it open. Aria squeezed her eyes shut, using the last ounce of her failing strength to kick at his shins. Suddenly, a blinding, apocalyptic flood of high-beam lights illuminated the narrow street. The deafening screech of burning rubber completely drowned out the rain. Marcus froze, shielding his eyes from the blinding glare. A massive matte black Rolls-Royce had drifted sideways into the alley, perfectly blocking the only exit. The heavy reinforced door of the Phantom slowly swung open. Alexander Blackwood stepped out into the freezing rain. He didn't look like a CEO. He looked like the god of death arriving to collect a debt. His dark eyes were fixed entirely on Marcus's hand, which was still gripping Aria's coat. "Let her go," Alexander commanded. His voice wasn't loud. It was terrifyingly calm, vibrating with a lethal, absolute authority that made the air pressure drop. Marcus squinted, his arrogant brain failing to process who was standing in front of him. "Who the hell are you? Mind your own business, pal, or I'll have you thrown in jail. I own this district." In a fraction of a second, Alexander moved. He crossed the 10 feet of distance with the terrifying speed of an apex predator. Before Marcus could even draw a breath to scream, Alexander's large hand clamped around Marcus's throat, lifting the grown man completely off his feet and slamming him brutally against the hood of the Mercedes. Marcus choked, his eyes bulging in pure horror as his feet dangled in the air. He clawed desperately at Alexander's steel grip, but the billionaire didn't flinch. "Oh, you own this district?" Alexander whispered lethally, leaning in so close Marcus could see his own reflection in the tyrant's dead eyes. "You own nothing. You are a dead man breathing my air." Aria slid down the brick wall, coughing and gasping for air. She looked up, her eyes widening in sheer disbelief. It was him, the terrifying billionaire who had stolen her daughter and thrown her onto the streets. Why was he here? Was he here to finish her off? Alexander pulled his phone from his pocket with his free hand. He hit a single speed dial button. "Silas," Alexander ordered, his voice echoing in the rain. "The St. Jude Medical Board. Buy it, liquidate the entire board of directors, strip Dr. Marcus of his medical license globally, and release the embezzlement files to the FBI immediately." Marcus's face turned purple, his arrogant sneer completely shattered by raw terror. He realized, with crushing finality, exactly who was holding him by the throat. Alexander Blackwood, the Emperor of New York. "Wait, please," Marcus gurgled, tears streaming down his face, begging for mercy. Alexander felt no mercy. He threw Marcus like a broken rag doll into the filthy dumpster beside them. "The FBI will be here in 3 minutes. If you ever say her name again, I will bury you alive." The alley fell into a heavy, dramatic silence, save for the sound of the rain. Alexander turned around. He looked at Aria, who was huddled on the wet concrete, trembling uncontrollably, looking at him with absolute terror. The bloodlust in Alexander's eyes instantly vanished. The towering, intimidating emperor, completely shattered. The massive oak doors of the Blackwood estate swung open. Alexander didn't let Aria walk. He carried her trembling, exhausted body in his arms, wrapping his heavy overcoat around her to block the bitter wind. The moment they stepped into the grand foyer, a heartbreaking, frantic cry echoed from the top of the marble staircase. "Mommy, is that Mommy Aria?" Lily was standing at the edge of the stairs, her tiny hands gripping the golden railing. She was wearing a silk nightgown, but her feet were bare, her unseeing eyes wide with desperate hope. She had recognized the faint, familiar scent of rain and cheap lavender soap. Aria struggled against Alexander's chest, her maternal instincts overriding her exhaustion. "Lily, I'm here, baby. Mommy is right here." Alexander gently set Aria down. She didn't even wait to find her balance. She scrambled up the marble steps, falling to her knees and pulling the little girl into a desperate, crushing embrace. Lily buried her face into Aria's wet shoulder, sobbing uncontrollably. "You came back. The scary man took me away, and it was so cold without you. I didn't eat, Mommy. I saved my food for you." Alexander stood at the bottom of the stairs, watching them. The invincible billionaire felt his throat completely close up. He was the scary man. He was the villain in his own daughter's story. That night, the suffocating silence of the mansion was finally broken. Lily ate 3 bowls of warm soup, holding Aria's hand the entire time. She refused to let go, terrified it was just a dream. Eventually, exhausted from crying, the little girl fell into a deep, peaceful sleep in Aria's arms. Alexander silently entered the dimly lit bedroom. He dismissed the team of private nurses with a sharp flick of his wrist. He held a small, silver medical kit. Aria flinched as he approached, instinctively shielding Lily. The trauma of the alleyway was still fresh in her mind. "I'm not going to hurt you," Alexander whispered, his voice impossibly soft. He knelt beside the bed. "Your knees. They are bleeding from the pavement. Let me." Aria hesitated, her breath hitching as the ruthless Emperor of New York carefully took her bruised, scraped ankle. His massive hands, which had literally crushed a man's throat an hour ago, were now treating her wounds with agonizing gentleness. He applied the antiseptic slowly, his dark eyes focused on the cuts. "I have destroyed men for far less than what I did to you," Alexander said, his voice raw with guilt. "I don't expect your forgiveness, Aria, but I swear on my life, you will never lack anything again." Aria looked at the top of his head, seeing the exhaustion in his broad shoulders. She realized the tyrant was just a broken father, terrified of losing the only light in his dark world. "I didn't save her for money, Mr. Blackwood," she said quietly. "I saved her because she is my daughter, too." Alexander looked up, their eyes locking. The fierce, pure love in her eyes struck a match in the cold, dead vault of his heart. Something profound and undeniable shifted between them. Over the next 2 weeks, the absolute monarch of Vanguard Maritime transformed. He canceled board meetings and delayed European mergers just to be home by 5 p.m. One sunny afternoon, Aria walked into the grand living room and stopped dead in her tracks. She covered her mouth to muffle a laugh. Alexander, wearing a tailored 3-piece suit, was sitting cross-legged on a pink playmat. Lily was giggling, enthusiastically trying to place a plastic tiara on his head. Alexander looked completely out of his element, struggling awkwardly to braid Lily's hair with his large fingers. "It's uneven," Alexander muttered, frowning fiercely at the crooked braid as if it were a hostile corporate takeover. "Silas, find me a tutorial on YouTube, immediately." Silas, standing stiffly in the corner, cleared his throat. "Right away, sir." Aria couldn't hold it in. A genuine, bright laugh escaped her lips. The sound was like a silver bell ringing in the heavy mansion. Alexander froze. He looked up, absolutely mesmerized. It was the first time he had ever seen her smile. The dark shadows under her eyes were fading, replaced by a radiant, breathtaking glow. He realized, with a sudden, overwhelming force, that he didn't just want to protect her. He wanted to own that smile forever. But in the shadows of the second-floor balcony, someone else was watching the happy scene. Valeria gripped the marble balustrade so hard her manicured nails chipped. Her beautiful face was twisted into a mask of pure, ugly jealousy. For 5 years, she had patiently played the role of the devoted sister, waiting for Alexander to break down and turn to her. Now, a filthy slum rat had simply walked in and stolen her empire. "You think you've won?" Valeria whispered into the empty hallway, her eyes narrowing as she watched Alexander look at Aria. I killed Elena. I poisoned the brat. I won't let a beggar take what belongs to me. Valeria pulled out a burner phone. She dialed a highly encrypted, untraceable number. The same mercenaries she had hired 5 years ago. "It's me," she hissed coldly. "I have a new contract. 2 targets this time. I want it to look like a tragic accident. And I want it done by the end of the week." Unaware of the venomous plot brewing above them, the fragile peace continued to blossom in the living room. Later that evening, the mansion was quiet. Aria stood on the outdoor terrace, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders as she looked out at the sprawling, illuminated gardens. The luxury still felt foreign, intimidating. "You're shivering," a deep, resonant voice said from behind her. Alexander stepped onto the terrace. He didn't ask for permission. He stood behind her, wrapping his own thick, custom-tailored jacket around her shoulders, his large hands lingering just a second too long on her arms. His proximity sent a sudden, electric jolt down Aria's spine. "I spoke with the lead surgeon today," Alexander said, his tone shifting into business, but his eyes remaining intensely focused on her profile. "They have synthesized an antidote to repair Lily's optic nerves. The surgery is scheduled for next week. She will see again." Aria gasped, turning to face him, her eyes filled with overwhelming relief. "Is it true? Oh my God. Alexander, thank you. Thank you so much." In her excitement, she didn't realize she had used his first name. She threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. Alexander went completely still. His heart hammered violently against his ribs. Slowly, tentatively, he wrapped his arms tightly around her waist, pulling her flush against his solid body. He buried his face in her hair, breathing in the sweet scent of her shampoo. "You don't need to thank me, Aria," Alexander murmured, his voice thick with raw emotion. He gently pulled back, cupping her face in his hands. His thumbs brushed away a stray tear from her cheek. "I am the one who owes you everything. I want to give you the world. I want to spend the rest of my life making up for the pain I caused you." He leaned in closer. The space between them vanished. Aria's breath caught in her throat. She looked at his lips, feeling the intoxicating, overwhelming pull of his gravity. But before their lips could meet, a sharp crash echoed from inside the house. The sound of breaking glass. Alexander's romantic haze instantly shattered. The lethal predator returned. He pushed Aria behind him, his hand instinctively reaching for the concealed weapon inside his jacket. "Stay behind me," he ordered coldly. The peace was over. The devil was in his house, and the final war was about to begin. Alexander drew his weapon, his towering frame shielding Aria completely. The romantic warmth on the terrace instantly vanished, replaced by the suffocating, icy tension of a war zone. The crash had come from the second floor, from Lily's nursery. "Aunt Lily!" Aria screamed, her maternal panic overriding any sense of fear. She tried to run past him, but Alexander caught her arm, his grip firm but protective. "Stay close to me," Alexander ordered, his voice a low, lethal growl. "Do not let go of my hand." They sprinted through the grand hallways. The mansion was unnervingly quiet. Where were the guards? Where was Silas? The impenetrable security of the Blackwood estate seemed to have magically dissolved. Alexander kicked the heavy oak door of the nursery open. Inside, the room was in ruins. The window had been shattered. 4 men in black tactical gear, wearing ski masks and holding silenced assault rifles, stood in the center of the room. And sitting gracefully on the edge of the child's bed, wearing a stunning crimson evening gown, was Valeria. She was holding a terrified, weeping Lily by the hair, pressing a cold, silver pistol directly to the blind child's temple. Auntie Valeria. It hurts. Please let me go. Lily sobbed, her tiny hands frantically trying to pry Valeria's manicured fingers from her hair. Aria felt her knees buckle. She let out a guttural, heartbroken cry. Lily, let her go, you psycho. Take me instead. Just let the child go. Valeria laughed. It was a high, shrill sound that echoed off the nursery walls. Oh, how touching. The slum rat wants to play the martyr. Don't worry, beggar. You'll join the brat in hell very shortly. Alexander didn't lower his weapon. His face was a mask of cold, impenetrable stone. Valeria, you brought mercenaries into my house. You put a gun to my daughter's head. You realize there is no corner of this earth where you can hide from me now, don't you? Valeria stood up, yanking Lily up with her. The child cried out in pain. Valeria's eyes burned with unhinged, obsessive fury. Hide? Why would I hide, Alex? Tonight, a terrible tragedy will occur. A group of violent intruders broke in. They killed your precious little bastard and the filthy whore you brought home. It's such a shame. But don't worry. I will be here to comfort you. Just like I've always been. Aria's blood ran cold. The sheer malice radiating from the elegant woman was suffocating. You poisoned her, didn't you? Alexander asked, his voice dead. He wanted to hear it. He wanted a full confession. Valeria sneered, pacing the room. Of course I did. I sprinkled that neurotoxin into her formula when she was just 3 months old. She was supposed to die quietly, in her crib. But the little freak survived and only went blind. So I had these men stage a kidnapping and throw her into a frozen ravine. Valeria pointed the gun at Aria. And she would have died if this pathetic trash hadn't dug her out of the snow. I've spent 5 years waiting for my crown, Alex. I even cut Elena's brake line so you could be mine. The room went dead silent. The confession hung in the air, heavy and saturated with blood. She had murdered his wife. She had poisoned his child. Aria covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face in horror. But Alexander didn't scream. He didn't shoot. Instead, a slow, terrifying, and deeply sinister smile spread across the tyrant's face. He slowly lowered his gun and slipped it back into his holster. You really think you could bypass my security, Valeria? Alexander asked, his voice suddenly echoing with booming, absolute power. You think you could sneak 4 armed men into the most fortified estate in New York without my permission? Valeria frowned, her hand trembling slightly. What are you talking about? Kill them! Shoot them right now! She screamed at the mercenaries. The 4 men in tactical gear didn't move. They didn't aim their rifles at Alexander. Slowly, simultaneously, the 4 men reached up and pulled off their black ski masks. Valeria's eyes bulged in pure, unadulterated horror. The leader of the mercenaries was Silas. The other 3 were the elite commanders of Alexander's shadow unit. The men you hired 5 years ago are buried under the foundation of a warehouse in New Jersey. Silas stated coldly, stepping toward Valeria. We intercepted your burner phone call yesterday, Miss Valeria. We simply intercepted your new assassins, put them to sleep, and took their place tonight. Valeria dropped the gun as if it had burned her skin. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the floor, her glamorous red dress pooling around her like spilled blood. Silas swiftly scooped up the crying Lily and handed her safely into Aria's waiting, desperate arms. Aria buried her face in Lily's hair, sobbing in overwhelming relief as she carried the child out of the room. Alexander stepped forward until he was standing over the trembling, hyperventilating woman who had destroyed his family. Alex, please, I did it for you. I love you. Valeria shrieked, crawling toward him and trying to grab his polished shoes. Alexander kicked her hands away with extreme disgust. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small digital recorder. He pressed a button, and Valeria's entire confession, from killing Elena to poisoning Lily, played back with crystal-clear audio. "This room is wired to the FBI headquarters," Alexander said, his voice dropping the temperature of the room to absolute zero. "Your shares in Blackwood Enterprises have been legally stripped. Your bank accounts are seized. You are completely bankrupt, Valeria." Red and blue police lights began flashing through the shattered nursery window. The wail of federal sirens surrounded the estate. "I won't just let you die," Alexander whispered, leaning down to look into her panicked eyes. "You will spend the rest of your miserable, pathetic life in a maximum security federal penitentiary, stripped of your name, stripped of your luxury. You will rot in a concrete box, knowing that the slum rat you despised is sitting on your throne." Federal agents swarmed the room. They violently dragged Valeria to her feet, slapping cold steel handcuffs onto her wrists. She screamed, thrashing like a rabid animal, her elegant facade completely destroyed as they dragged her out of the mansion. Alexander didn't watch her go. The monster was finally slayed. He turned around and walked down the hall, following the sound of the soft, beautiful lullaby Aria was singing to his daughter. 3 months later, the heavy scent of antiseptic in the VIP suite of Manhattan General Hospital was replaced by the overwhelming fragrance of 1,000 white roses. Alexander stood by the edge of the hospital bed, his heart pounding harder than it ever had in any boardroom. Aria stood beside him, holding his hand so tightly her knuckles were white. The world's top neuro-ophthalmologist stepped forward. "Are you ready, Lily?" Lily nodded bravely. Slowly, the doctor began to unravel the thick white bandages covering her eyes. Round and round, the gauze fell away, revealing her small, delicate face. "Keep them closed for a second, sweetheart," Aria whispered, leaning in. "Then blink very slowly." Lily fluttered her eyelashes. For the first time in 5 years, the milky haze was completely gone, replaced by stunning, crystal-clear, emerald-green eyes. The exact same eyes as her father. She blinked against the soft light. Her gaze darted around the room, taking in the colors, the flowers, the ceiling. And then, her eyes landed on the beautiful woman standing beside her bed. Lily reached out a trembling hand, gently touching Aria's tear-streaked face. "Mommy, Aria," Lily breathed, a brilliant, radiant smile breaking across her face. "You look exactly like the angel I imagined." Aria broke down, pulling Lily into her arms, sobbing tears of absolute, unfiltered joy. Lily then turned her head. She looked at the towering, handsome man, wiping his own tears away. She didn't flinch. She opened her arms wide. "Daddy!" Alexander collapsed to his knees beside the bed, wrapping his arms securely around his daughter and the woman who had saved her. He buried his face in their embrace, a king who had finally found his home. A week later, under a crisp, golden autumn sky, the family of 3 stood on a quiet, serene hill overlooking the ocean. A beautiful marble headstone read, "Elena Blackwood, beloved wife and mother." Lily, wearing a pretty white dress, knelt down and placed a bouquet of fresh white roses on the grave. "Hi, Mommy Elena," Lily said brightly. "I can see the ocean now. It's so pretty. Daddy is taking good care of me, and Mommy Aria is here too. She saved me from the cold." Alexander stepped forward, wrapping his arms securely around Aria's waist. He looked down at the gravestone of his first love. There was no pain left, only profound peace and closure. "I found them, Elena," Alexander whispered into the wind. "The monsters are gone. Lily is safe. And I found the angel you sent to protect her in the snow. I promise to love them both until my last breath." Aria leaned her head against Alexander's broad shoulder, her heart completely full. "Are you ready, my queen?" Alexander asked softly, turning to look into Aria's eyes. Aria smiled, a radiant, breathtaking smile that eclipsed the sun. She lifted her left hand, where a massive, flawless 10-carat diamond ring sparkled brilliantly next to a cheap, faded friendship bracelet Lily had woven for her years ago. "I'm ready," Aria whispered. The scene transitioned to the grandest ballroom in New York. Flashbulbs exploded like a meteor shower. The world's elite watched in absolute awe as Alexander Blackwood, the invincible tyrant, walked down the aisle of white orchids. But he wasn't walking alone. Holding his right hand was his beautiful, bright-eyed daughter. And holding his left hand was Aria, draped in a custom-designed silk gown fit for royalty. The poor, desperate girl from the slums who had sacrificed everything for a stranger's child was poor no longer. The billionaire didn't just give her his name. As they stood before the altar, Alexander handed Aria a leather-bound folio. It was the transfer of 50% of the Vanguard Empire. He didn't just make her his wife. He made her his absolute equal. Alexander pulled Aria flush against his chest, his dark eyes burning with eternal devotion. He crashed his lips down onto hers in a passionate, triumphant kiss. The crowd erupted into deafening cheers. The winter storm was completely forgotten. The tyrant had finally found his light, and their empire would reign forever.
And that is how a selfless mother with absolutely nothing captured the heart of the most ruthless billionaire in the world. Did you enjoy this epic emotional journey? Let us know in the comments if you cried when Lily finally opened her eyes. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you never miss another billionaire love story. Thanks for listening, and see you in the next romance.